Hello.
There we go. Hello.
Hi. Welcome to our podcast. We'll wait for people to pop up, but first, just a general hello. How is everybody?
Good.
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Good.
I know, Joel, you just finished your dissertation, right?
Yeah. I finished it 2 weeks ago, but it's been dissertation burnout ever since. So it feels like I finished my dissertation just yesterday.
Yeah.
And then everybody else. I know Katie and Joel are in the same time zone, so it's late for you guys, early for Kat, middle of the day for me and Catherine.
Yeah.
I'm doing well. It's hot where I am, so it was super cloudy and nice, and now it's super hot, and I'm a little upset about that, but I'm good. I'm chilling.
Yeah, Ellie's really hot too. It's kind of annoying. But yeah,
Isn't Ellie always hot?
Oh, actually, no, it's weird because the last couple months have been really cold and everybody's just confused. We're like, this is Los Angeles. Why is it 60 degrees? People are wearing sweaters. It was weird. But so Leviathan Wakes is the first book in the Expanse, and we read it this month. So what did we think? Let's go around and just do general thoughts. This was a reread for me, and I think Katie, have you read it?
Yeah, I've read it before as well.
Okay, so for me and Katie, it was a reread, and I think it was a first-time read for everybody else. So, yeah, just general thoughts. Kaz, you want to start?
Sure. I ended up really enjoying it, and it was definitely a very compelling read. Once I started reading it, I couldn't really put it down. There was just a lot of intrigue. I really enjoyed all the mysteries and the characters. In particular, I really liked the kind of Roki crew banter and dynamics, and getting to know them a little bit more. And then seeing how the two kind of storylines interwove as well. So I think I gave it I'm feeling confident about a 4 stars for this one. So yeah, really enjoyed it, really captivated by it, and I'm super excited to continue the series.
Joel?
I am basically exactly the same. I think that the world building was also done superbly well in trying to immerse us in this new dynamic between Mars, the belt, and Earth as a whole, and kind of the conflicts between them. I think it was just the characters were also really developed. I think, Kaz said, the way that the plots kind of converged, and just it was a very satisfying moment for me, and I loved it. And so yeah, I'm pretty much the same with it being quite a strong 4 stars, because yeah, it was just a really, really engrossing read.
Catherine?
Yes. So for me, I actually would describe this as what I wish Red Rising by Pierce Brown was, which maybe that's an interesting comparison. But when I reread Red Rising, I was like, that wasn't as good. And then reading this, I was actually a lot more intrigued. And due to the fact that it's sci-fi, I was like, oh, this is what I wanted out of Red Rising. And I am not going to lie, there were parts where I zoned out, but that tends to happen a lot to me. I was most intrigued by just the series of events that occurred. I just was kind of there for the ride, and I don't do star ratings, so I don't have an official star rating at all, but I did enjoy it. I think it was solid. It wasn't something that I was oh my gosh, that was so amazing, but I felt really, I felt good about it. You know what I mean? Kind of middle of the road. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell, I would say.
Yeah.
Katie?
I think I gave it 4.5 stars. And I gave it 4.5 stars the first time. I generally stay on the same rating. But yeah, I really enjoy it. It's definitely one of my favorite sci-fi worlds. I think Kaz and Joel were saying, just the kind of setup and everything. And I feel this book does kind of set it up really well. And I feel I maybe have a slightly biased opinion because I've read more books in the series, and I just love the Rossi crew so much. So I really like that. Yeah, I just enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Katie, I mean, just going back, especially because I've read the all pretty much everything, including all the short stories, and so going back to the beginning and just reading how they started out was just so amazing. Especially, I didn't realize how much foreshadowing was in this book until I reread this book, and there were so many little lines and just little moments here and there that I was like, oh my god, that is gonna be so huge in like 3 books. So yeah, everybody's gonna have to go and reread it with a fine-tooth comb, obviously.
Oh
but,
my!
No,
that's for a few years' time.
no, but no, it was great. Like I just really enjoyed it. Yeah, this isn't the best book in the series, I think.
No, yeah, it's definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, but it's still really good. I think it's a really good entry point too, because I think the other books start getting a little bit more complicated and having like different multiple POVs. Basically, they change up who the POV characters are almost every book. So having 2 characters in this book, I think, was a good choice because it was like A plot line and B plot line, you know?
Yeah, but I guess in the other books, it's like it's always Holden, but then the other ones kind of switch and change.
Yeah.
Oh right. I do actually see a review, and someone was saying that like one of the favorite female characters from the show shows up in like book 2 or 3 as a
Yeah. Oh, Amasarala.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I did start watching like the show after reading the book, and I think I got to like episode 3 of the 1st season because I was like I was putting it on in the background, and then but I think I might need to go like back and rewatch like the first 3 episodes because I can't remember what happens. But now I'm like I could maybe continue and just figure out from the book, but I'm like maybe the show is like somehow different slightly, so we'll see.
I think because I actually watched the show like up to about season 4 because season 5 wasn't out yet before I ever read the books. And I think so like season 1 is kind of it's only kind of the first half of Leviathan Wakes because like some of the events that happen later in the book actually happen in season 2. And so I think when I read Leviathan Wakes for the first time, I was like, oh, this is more than I was expecting to like happen in this first book.
Yeah, when we get into spoilers, we'll kind of talk about that. But yeah, the first book is stretched over the first season and a half. And then book 2 is like the rest of season 2 and the first half of season 3. And then book 3 is just the back half of season 3. Like it's super condensed. And then book 4 is season 4, book 5 is season 5. So they're back on like 1 book a season.
Yeah.
But sadly, season 6 is going to be the last season of the Expanse for now.
But would definitely highly recommend the show. Very attractive.
But yeah, so just general question to y'all who have not seen the show after reading the book, would you then want to go see the show? Like,
yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll talk a little bit more non-spoileries and then we'll get into the big spoilers. But I think just general question for everybody, who is your favorite crew member on the Rocinante?
Oh, also, thank you for letting me know how it's pronounced because I was like,
or the rest.
I really liked Naomi, and in particular, I really, really appreciated the relationship between Holden and Naomi. Like from the get-go, I made some notes like after a couple of 100 pages, and I was just like, I thought the moments between them were like they were both just so aware of what the other person was thinking and feeling, and there was just so much like care and respect for each other. Like they'd actually listen to what the other one had to say, even if it kind of was opposing what the other one was doing at the time, and they just had really good advice for each other. And I really loved that basis for that relationship.
I hate miscommunication tropes. And I feel like they were just like, oh, thank you. A couple that knows how to communicate with each other. So I agree with that.
Honestly, like I think Naomi for me as well, purely because like she's just amazing. And like I think especially what Kaz was saying about like the communication between Naomi and Holden, it was just I was just like, oh, like this is cute. But also at the same time, like the entire situation, I'm just like, oh like it. Yeah, that's
Catherine.
Oh, I was kind of saying the same thing. I really like Naomi. I did like Holden. I loved their relationship very much. I think like Kaz's explanation of their relationship was actually one of my favorite parts, I think.
And then Katie, you obviously have a lot more context.
Yeah, I do. I was gonna say, I feel like in this book, Naomi is probably my favorite, but overall, I would say Amos. I just love him, like the kind of like cinnamon roll psychopath type character.
No,
but I feel like we don't get to see a lot of him in this book, but like as the series goes on,
He has a type.
I'm excited.
No, seriously, Katie does have a type.
You have a very distinct type.
But no, I love Amos. Also, just I think he had the most like the singular scene that described his character the best, and it was when he talked to Miller. At that scene when what happened, I'm not gonna go spoilery right now, but like just that whole scene with Amos talking to Miller is just the most like he is. I don't even know how to say that. He's just like so Amos. Like he is so singular as a character. And I love it. Also, this book, rereading it was really interesting because, like, yes, I love Naomi and I love the Rousey crew, but Miller really stood out to me in this read of the book, just because I think his plotline is generally more interesting than Holden's up until they kind of intersect in the back half. So what were your guys' opinions about Miller as a character?
He's a very interesting character. I mean, I don't think he's necessarily a likable character, especially for a majority of it, but I did really enjoy seeing his development. I will say I felt a bit weird about, because I didn't perceive it as love, but it was definitely an obsession with Julie Mel, and it was an interesting time. He was definitely a very interesting, complex character for sure.
True. I think he's definitely a interesting character, and especially like I don't think it was like I think it was like a form of love, but almost in a way that it was like where like that he's like almost worshipping her in a way, which is quite interesting because I think especially given the like the whole plot and his plot and like his personality, I think it's almost like it was a spark of hope for him. So he's kind of like clinging on to that and trying to hold on to it as much as he can. And so he's like, I need to attach myself immensely.
Ooh, immensely, indeed.
True.
I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I mentioned this before, but most of my enjoyment with this book, like, as much as the characters are really interesting, and I know this is just the first book, I didn't feel overly attached to really anybody. Not so much that they weren't great, but there was this kind of like, well, I'll just use the word detachment again. There was like this weird detachment between me and a lot of the characters. I was just more like, and this book can get quite brutal, and I think because of that, I was just like, okay, let's just move on. Everyone's dying, but it's fine, you know? And that's kind of how I felt with like each character. And you know, that was the end of my thought. I basically felt just kind of like, this is interesting. I'm more here to see like who's gonna die and who's not gonna die. You know? So anyway.
Yeah, I think this book is definitely like all plot, like just vibes, like let's go.
Yeah, I liked it for that.
Oh, Katie, go.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I kind of agree with that. I feel like it takes you a few books to like really for the like crew to grow in you, because I think for me, because I'd watched the show, I already sort of loved the characters, so like even from book one I like the characters, but it's definitely slightly, it's not like one of those sometimes you read like sci-fi books, you can use Becky Chambers because I love her, and you just absolutely fall in love with the characters like instantly, whereas I feel like this is more, it takes a while to like warm up to them, and it's more like the plot that you're kind of invested in.
I feel that.
Agreed.
So what did you guys think of like the plot as a whole? Because we have this whole mystery going on, and you know, we have Miller's with Julie Mal, he's trying to find out what happened to Julie, and then we have the Rousey crew, which is basically just on the run for like the first like 300 pages of the book. What do we think of the plot? Non-spoiler, and then after this we'll get into spoilers.
There was a lot of it. And I really liked it. I really liked that it was fast paced, and obviously being like a nice chunky book, I didn't feel like it was taking me forever to read, which is great because I've been struggling with my reading so much this year. So it was nice to dive into something that was still a lot to learn, but it was still really fast paced and kept you going. Yeah, the Rosie crew, my gosh, they've been through it. Through it. I was like, is it ever going to stop? Like the kind of moments where they're like, we can take a breath, we can chill. I was like, this must be so strange for you.
Where they just sit down and have like a lasagna dinner, and it's just like the weirdest thing.
Just like
wrong.
Like, I also really like that it was a fast-paced novel because I feel like, especially for like quite a chunky novel, you kind of need that to keep you going. But I also like that we did have like those small snippets of like the lasagna dinner and like other moments. But like in those moments, you're literally just like, what's gonna happen now? Well, how can it get worse? And it gets worse and worse. And then you're just like, what the fuck? But no, overall it was a really like good plot, and I think it was nice that also both of the plots kind of intersected and came together, because I feel like especially for like a first book, it's really good for that to happen, because then by the end you're like following one singular plot strand, and it's like simplicity.
Yes.
I agree. I think I really liked how it just like from the get-go, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're moving. That's great. Let's do it. And I was really excited to kind of, and I'm not going to lie, I really do enjoy when books get brutal. Like I'm kind of like, please don't be afraid to kill off your characters. Like, do it. Like, don't just like, please
do it
just
right now.
I dare you. Seriously, I'm like, I dare you to do it. And then this book almost like took me up on a dare, and I was like, yes, kill this one next. And like, okay, that's horrible, but like really, I enjoyed. I think it made just like the conflict and tension so much more realistic for me. I listened to the audiobook and I really enjoyed. I actually really liked the narrator, and I think like they did a good job of I think heightening the stakes, but also just the pacing with this. I will say pacing was pretty strong for me. I really enjoyed how it flowed. And I was just excited to see what happened. And then anytime we had moments of dialogue between characters, I feel like that was like, it felt intentional and it felt meaningful. And so anyway, so that's me. I enjoyed the pacing with that regard.
Katie?
Yeah, I like the plot, and I like how it sort of explores a little bit about the like politics of the like galaxy or solar system, but also introduces a kind of like more alien aspect with like the protomolecule and like finding out the mystery of that. And I like how it sort of blends the two together. And I feel like throughout the series, again, that's kind of an ongoing theme of like exploring both the sort of politics, because I really like politic heavy fantasy, and I feel like this sort of brings it into space, and then like mixing the two. So,
reading this, it was really interesting because like I think the last time I read this book was before I watched the show, so I kind of had the show's plot in my brain. And from what I remember, the show actually downplays the war like a lot. Like it's more focused on like the plot with Julie Mao and like what's happening in the belt, versus like Earth and Mars literally going to war like throttle.
Just like stations and
I just loved all the little like world building details in this. Like it just seems like whenever Miller is like checking his terminal or like they're watching the news, there's like more crazy shit that's going on like in the inner. It just gave this feeling of like escalation, just like to like a fever pitch. It's like, where the hell is this gonna go? And I love that feeling of like, it really felt like the whole solar system was like on edge and like about to break out. And I love that about this book.
Can I ask for you, Blake, and anybody else who's watched the show, like in comparison, do you enjoy I mean, I know you're not like finished, but do you enjoy the show more or the books more?
It's really interesting to me because I actually think that The Expanse is one of the best book adaptations that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree.
It just what it does is, because the series was so far in, like at the point that they started the show, they actually take a lot of like plot threads and things from like later books and start sticking them into like season 1 and like season 2. So like for book readers, you start watching the show and you're like, holy shit, that's like a payoff for like, you know, seasons down the line, but because they have that information, like in the working on the show, there's so many hints and things like it's amazing. Because like there's some stuff that the books kind of like hyper focus on, and then they only focus it like on in that book. And I'm specifically thinking about one thing that happens in book 5, and they start mentioning it in season 1, and they do it so well.
I like that.
And then also, I think the way they paced the show is really nice. Like it's, it starts slow, but it starts slow for a reason, so that when like shit starts getting crazier, you're like totally with it. Also, the special effects are insane. Like Katie can attest. It's
it's a really great show. I definitely
like that. I could see myself liking it more. Like I generally kind of do. Like with, for example, with Shadow and Bone, I like how they like cross timelines. I loved what they did with that, and I love when they kind of rely upon future plot lines as a beginning product. So that's cool. I should watch the show. It looks interesting.
Would you recommend waiting until reading a few books to start it, or?
I would, just because I think there's so much, like I have gotten more from the show because I've read the books. Like specifically, I'm thinking about moments in like season 3. Book 3 was the one I think that changed the most from book to screen. And it, like, I love the show, but also that like hurts me a little bit because book 3 is my favorite. Is it
really?
It's there's something about like
book 3 is my least favorite.
Really?
Ooh,
I don't know. Well, you know, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's kind of like a siege plotline-ish type thing that mostly takes place in one location. And I love those types of stories. Like, those are my favorite. So yeah, I just like, there's so many also, sorry, I'm ranting, but like one of the best things that the show does is it actually takes multiple book characters and makes them into one. So you have like characters who like will serve like different type purposes, and then the show will take like those couple characters and merge them into one character. So like you still have the same things happening, but the audience can like focus more on one person. And it's the way they do it. So you don't have like a Game of Thrones problem where you have like thousands of people, like named characters running around, and the audience who the hell is it?
I like that actually.
Yeah, but I would probably definitely recommend reading book 2 before starting the show, because there's characters that you first meet in book 2, but they introduce them in season 1. I think from a like more of a world building perspective, because obviously you're not inside the characters' heads, so you're getting like characters more on Earth, so you can like see it through them.
Yeah, so book 2 introduces Christian Avasarala, and she is like a UN politician. He loves her. I love her too. But yeah, so they introduce her in season 1, so like we have like a perspective on Earth while the events are like kind of going on to like balance out, because it is mostly focused on the belt in this book, so you do get some of the inner stuff. So I think one last question before we go into spoilers. What did you guys think of the conflict, just the overall conflict between Earth, Mars, and the belt? And just what side would you choose if you had to pick a side?
Oh God! That's a question.
Oops.
No side.
I feel like I feel like I'd probably have a bit more of an idea of that after reading maybe another couple of books, because these are still quite early on in this stage and we're getting like the outline of the conflict, but I feel like I still don't completely understand the depths of it, if that makes sense. But like I pardon?
I was just saying,
I love the chaos.
We will return to this question after Kat has read a couple more.
I think with the conflict though, I really like it. I feel like it's kind of realistic of what could potentially happen to like if our humanity was to expand into the solar system. Like you can see that situation sort of arising quite easily.
Oh yeah, we know.
I don't know if you side of it.
I'd be far too neutral. I would be like as detached as like, well, that's not true. It'd be inevitable to be detached, but like me being very neutral, I would be like, I'm just gonna wait this out a little bit and try and survive while I can. I definitely think I'd need to get more information before picking a side.
Oh wait, I've got a good answer actually. I'd be on the side of the Rossi crew. That's my side in the conflict.
Love that.
And I was just going to say, I really like how with the Rosie crew, like obviously makes sense, and particularly in Miller's perspective, you do get to see more of the, like, on a personal level, the this conflict, like his partner is an Earther, and the discrimination he experiences and how tough his job is, because he's like one of the only people from Earth out in the belt working as like with this police company. But with the Rosie crew, like, they're kind of from everywhere, and it wasn't an issue. Like, it was very rarely brought up. So I really respected that contrast there, and also shows like the depth of those companionships between all of the members as well. Like, besides everything that they've been through, and obviously they would be quite close, but like even before that.
Okay, I think we can like get full tilt into spoilers now. So if you guys have not finished the book or read the book, you can leave and then return later, because we're gonna spoil it. We're gonna spoil all of it. Okay, so I think kind of leaping off of Kaz's last comment, I'm going to just kind of ask you, or not ask you guys, but like, I think we should talk about this, because I think this is like really interesting to me. One of my favorite things about the world building in The Expanse is like they've moved kind of beyond racial discrimination, and it's more like species discrimination, because the gravity has like literally changed, you know, because like the Martians are like kind of shorter, or no, Earths are like shorter, Martians are like kind of taller, and then Belters are like, their bones are literally like long, their heads are bigger. So it's been so many generations that like they have kind of been different now, and that's the source of discrimination against each other versus like skin tone. I thought that was really interesting.
I think that was interesting too. Oh, sorry, Kaz, you go.
I was just saying the exact same thing as you. That was very interesting.
I like when oh no, did I freeze? Sorry. Okay. I like when fantasy stories rely upon different sets of appearances, because like it's true that it's not just skin tone as a way of discriminating people, but like depending on what group of people you are in and what is the norm, like facial features, hair color, even, like I really do think it's an interesting play on like, or at least when you are in a world that is not necessarily Earth, like it's out, well, I'm not trying to be punny, but out of this world. Sorry, I think that I just said that. But like, I think it's a really good way to expand upon relevant issues in a fantasy / sci-fi world. So I really think it's satisfying when I see maybe I don't know if satisfying is the right word, but it's fascinating to see that take in a different way. So
yeah, and I think I agree as well that it was just very realistic, because obviously with globalization there's people moving around the world a lot, and I feel like in the future it will just continue. But then going to planets, going into space, there'd be so much more of that like petri dish of all the different type of people and ethnicities across space. There's like, I feel like there's definitely more of a mix, and we do see that with a lot of the characters that we meet. And so it does come down to, okay, what are the main differences between the people living here versus the people living here? So it definitely felt realistic.
Angela, you all said what I wanted to say.
Sorry, we stole your. Yeah, and actually, one of the best things I think the show does actually is they cast like very colorblindly. Like they're so like the show is so diverse and it's awesome, just like across the board. They don't make the Belters look super different though, because of budget reasons, which is sad.
Yeah.
But also, I think that, you know, one of my favorite moments in the book, I think, is when like I think Naomi is talking to Holden just about the difference of like growing up like in gravity, like with an environment versus like always worrying about air, water, like, and the Belters like mindset is so different because they haven't had like, they can't rely on it. Like they are constantly looking for it. And then when Miller is like talking to the, when he has like that kind of roommate situation with Diogo, the kid after the station assault, you know, he's like, it would be so easy for me to like look on him like as an inner and like find all these things to discriminate against him because he's so different from like the Earthers that it's like, sorry, you know what I'm talking about? Do you know this thing I'm talking about? It's just like they are so different because they have different values and different things that they appreciate. You know,
like the worries that they have on a day-to-day basis would be so different.
And I think that played
in the sky versus living under a dome.
Yeah, I think that played into like why Miller shot Dresden, which we'll get into the protomolecule plot. Yeah, I mean, how did we feel about that moment? Because that was a huge turning point, which separated Miller from the Rosie crew. Miller did it because he thought that was the best situation for the belt as a whole, and then Holden obviously was like, "This crosses my morals. I do not agree with that."
I thought that was so interesting because obviously, ever since Miller and Holden and their storylines intersect, they butt heads quite a bit. Like they're still kind of on the same side. They're not in opposition, like in the war or anything. Like they do have a kind of common goal, but morally they just perceive the world in very different ways, and things should be done so differently. So it was very interesting to see those conflicts because you're like, these guys could be friends, but I'm like, there's just so many things that they can't agree on. So it definitely comes to a head there. And it was just, I highlighted or like annotated the scene beforehand when Holden's like, you're part of the crew. What do you mean? And then
he's crying.
I had like the Arthur fist. I was like,
it makes sense, but it's still heartbreaking because like that was one of the things that they had butted heads about quite a bit. The fact that Holden's like, why are you just keep killing people left, right, and center? Are you even human anymore? But it makes so much sense for both of their characters, and it was very satisfying to see Dresden die so quickly.
Woo! Another dead person. Woo!
I think especially with like what Kaz was saying about like the differences in like the personalities, because like Holden really believes in like truth and justice, and he's very much like and then we see with Miller he's very much like cynical and like, ooh, like I want to die, but you know, like but I think as well, like with Dresden and that, it was kind of like a universal trolley problem in a way, both on Dresden's point of view but then also Miller's point of view. Like with Miller, it's kind of like, if I kill this one man, I can stop millions of people dying potentially. But then on Dresden's side, he's like, if I let millions of people die, I can let billions of people potentially be able to go explore the stars. And so it's like philosophy is going around, and you're just like, what do we do?
He was an interesting man, and I was like kind of horrified by what he's done. He created a million sociopaths so that they would not question their job. Like, oh, God.
I think that's one thing that sci-fi books in general do quite well, and this series especially, is like the kind of philosophical discussions of like, because you can have so much power like on one person, like, and I just think they discuss that really well.
My existentialist self really vibed during those moments. I was like, all right, let's do this.
I love that.
So kind of a question off of that. Do you guys think that Holden is too idealistic for his own good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
As someone idealistic myself, I empathize with his like ambition in that regard. But yeah, it'll bite you in the butt.
Because he unintentionally starts a war because he's
exactly.
He's like, the people must know. It's like, okay, but if you think about it first, like, you don't, like, he just doesn't. He like Joel was saying, like, very much about this is truth, but can't kind of objectively step back and think about the consequences of what that might mean. Even though I do like agree to him to an extent, like everyone should know. It's kind of like it was just so interesting because he's like, I never said that the Martians did it, but there was implications with the information he presented because of like
the communicator thing. It was like, yeah, this Martian thing was on the, and it's just like,
yeah, it's like, what are you talking about? I didn't implicate. I didn't say it was them. I was like, oh god.
I mean, he's right, but like he's not.
Exactly.
literally.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah. Just needs to
I think he has like such a strong sense of his own like moral fortitude that he'll just like rush into things without like really thinking through.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was interesting recklessness. But I was just expanding upon that. Yeah, he could be quite reckless because of it, which is very very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting people, and I don't mean to. Pacing is hard to read sometimes. I actually think this was a good example of like what happens when somebody becomes too idealistic, or like how dangerous ideology can be. And I mean, I love seeing that within fantasy books. Like a lot of, I mean, honestly, like literally every one of our wars is because somebody was too idealistic and a group of people were like, yeah, let's do this. And I think this was a good example of how even one individual can, I mean, like, it's like a butterfly effect. And I think it was interesting to say. And as Joel said earlier, it was chaos. Like, I just love seeing the chaos unfold. So I have to agree with you.
I think another character as well, and like especially the epilogue, Fred Johnson, I think he's another character whose ideology sometimes runs away with him.
Yeah, what do we think of Fred Johnson?
I loved it. He was so interesting.
Yeah.
He gave me kind of Dalinar vibes.
Hey,
Right.
let's go.
Joel, the only person who hasn't read the Stormlight Archive.
I'm just hyped now.
No, I mean, yeah, you're kind of right. Yeah, he has this like Fred Johnson has this vibe where like you want to trust him, but you also like don't know if you can trust him.
Yeah.
So it's like always this like I don't know.
Cautiously love him, you know.
Yeah. I actually last night I read the Butcher of Anderson Station, which is like a little short story about Fred Johnson. It's like really short. It was like 50 phone pages, which is like you can read in like 15 minutes. But it just kind of like described why like it was about the moment when he became part of the OPA and shifted away from being part of like Earth. And it was a great little bit of character work. But yeah, his character is so interesting because of that, because he was an Earther, he slaughtered a Belter station, and now he's like kind of the voice of the OPA for the Belt. So a lot of interesting contradictions there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I was hoping to read that before this, but I was like the last like 10 pages of the book I was falling asleep, so I had to
so let's go through the book's kind of plot, and because this book's plot was wild and went all over the place. So we start off, and Holden and his crew are on the Canterbury, this ice hauling ship. Holden has been there for like 5 years, and he's very comfortable there. And they get a distress call, and they go to check it out. So, and then we have a whole action scene where the Canterbury is vaporized, and they are on the run. It is Holden, Naomi, Amos, Alex, and Shed. What do we think of this whole section?
I'm gonna like look up a plot summary just so I can also re-follow along, because my brain is somewhere else.
So that happened, and then I'm going off of memory, so if I'm getting anything wrong, let me know. And then Shed dies brutally. He has
I was sad because the first time I ever like saw that was the TV show, and I was like, oh, I quite like this character, and then he just dies, and he's the medic as well. So
I found out why he died in a writing terms. It's so funny because I was like looking up about the Expanse, and basically. The Expanse used to be like an RPG tabletop game that people would play together that informed the plot, and the person who played Shed left the game, so they had to kill him off. And that's why he dies so suddenly.
Yeah. No,
That's so petty. That's
No,
so
it's actually-
petty. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
The drama.
James
Wow.
S.A. Corey is actually a duo. I don't know if you guys knew this, but James S.A. Corey is a duo of two writers, and they
I
actually,
think we knew that.
yeah, Abraham and Ty Frank. I forget the first, but yeah. So they used to be George R. R. Martin's like writing assistants.
Oh wow.
So,
That makes so much sense.
yeah. So they built this world of the Expanse as like an RPG that they would play like with their close group of friends, and then then they got the idea to like transcribe it and turn it into like a book series. So they had already plotted out the entire series and like what's going to happen before they even sat down to write it.
I mean, which makes sense with what you were saying before about things being so like foreshadowed quite far into the series. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It was
I think
interesting.
there's lots of interesting history.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel to me like two people wrote it. Like it felt like it had one authorial voice, you know?
I didn't even know
I guess
that.
it's-
Like, that's crazy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's fine. I was gonna say, like, I guess it's like really good like synergy between the two writers if you can only like see like one distinct voice between the two of them, because that's when you know like they work together really well.
Yeah, I wonder if like one of them wrote Holden's and one of them wrote Miller's. Like
Ooh, that would be interesting.
That would actually be really smart. Like if you were to co-author something, like it would be much more difficult to write the same character. But if you were like, you know, you're in charge of this character, I'm in charge of this character, and we have distinct voices, that would be really interesting.
Imagine like writing the first chapter, sending it to like the co-author, and then being like, okay, write chapter 2, and then they send you chapter 2, and then like it's like a DM conversation, but you're like replying with chapters of a book.
That should be an actual
really
like
interesting.
plot.
I really want to know how they like wrote these books, honestly, like
Literally.
the writing. Because co-author, like, yeah, I don't think there's many like really popular like co-authors that I know of. Like it's usually just one. I mean, there's like
The
some
only
class
one I
like
know is like Christina Lauren, the romance authors.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And I know that Becky Alberti and Adam Silvera wrote "What If It's Us," and I know that and some other. But yeah, like I don't. It's not as common as I thought it would be.
No.
You could see authors collabing, and it'd be like the most amazing thing. If like if they actually did it, you could see it becoming like huge. I don't know.
True.
I mean, look at Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan.
Biggest collab.
Okay, so after Shed dies, they get followed, and then they get captured by the Martians. So they go on the Donager, and they're being interrogated. But then they're under attack by the Belter ships, which aren't Belter ships. And then the Donager gets destroyed, and they get the Rocinante. Yeah. So, like, this whole section was really interesting because it's poised as the Martians, like, being bad and, like, going to probably interrogate them and torture them and kill them. But then they actually end up, like, sacrificing themselves to, like, let them escape. So it adds, like, more complexity to the, like I like this book. I don't think really let any of, like, Earth, Mars, or the Belt, like, stay in one kind of stereotypical like attitude. Like they all kind of shifted, and the attitudes about it shifted.
Yeah, and I think that's quite good because like you don't have a clear villain and you don't have like a clear side that you root for, and I think that's probably why that question earlier was so hard, like whose side would you be on, because it's so like fluctuant, like everyone has good and everyone has bad, and I think that's quite reflective of like real life as well.
And I mean, as they come to discover, there is somebody who is trying to start a war between the three of them, and that is Protogen. And Protogen is experimenting in the Belt with the proto-molecule. We're just going to jump around because I can't follow the whole plot in my head right now. But so what do we think of the proto-molecule and all the craziness that happened with that?
End all to be all.
What?
It's the end all to be all. Like it's strange, and just the way it would like as it like took over the
Eros.
The Eros ship, and then everyone was like like almost like zombify. It was like, ooh, I was like, oh, but also I really loved it because people were dying.
We seem to be on the same page in some way, and I support
honestly.
It's almost like an element of horror, like the kind of like growing.
Those type of conflicts in space are terrifying. Like as soon as you realize it's like there's something about, I mean this is pretty obvious, but like there's something about being in space and having those type of things occur where it's like you can't escape it. Like it's like you can't go anywhere. Where are you gonna go? And I think yes, I agree. Like that level of horror, I'm genuinely on the same page. I thought it was like, oh, okay, more people are dying. Let's go. Like just, yeah.
I love that moment when the alarms start going off and everybody starts freaking out because they're like, you know, our ship or like the station is like, you know, we're so fragile. Like it's this huge asteroid, but they're like, okay, a nuke went off. Like we're gonna lose pressure in the entire station. Like we're all gonna die unless we get to these shelters. And that's why everybody was so panicked. And it was so interesting because it's like, you know, it's this massive endeavor. It's this huge asteroid, and like one bomb can like take out an entire thing, and that's what they're terrified of. And that terror, like, you know, puts them in a position where they become protomolecule food.
Yeah, and but with the whole protomolecule thing, it's just so interesting because obviously the protomolecule itself isn't an evil thing. Like it's not intending to destroy humanity. It's just how it's adapting, because I thought the kind of history was so interesting, how like they're assuming that like some alien race shot it at them billions of years ago, but over time, like by the time it got there, Earth had developed past a stage where whatever the intention was would have been applicable. Like it wasn't it like it's
well it was
like a singular yeah exactly. And then wasn't it like it's supposed to work, or like it's suited for a singular molecule
cells.
organism? Yeah. But humans are a lot more complex than that now.
There was, you know, rib cages crawling around, hands, like little birds. Like I don't like. There was a bunch of crazy shit that happened.
Yeah,
I think that's something that's done so visually well in the show as well. And like, especially with Julie Mao, when she sort of becomes, it is creepy, but it's really good.
So I need to watch the show. Dang.
What did we think of the reveal that Julie was driving Eros?
Love it.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Because I think like, it kind of
very juicy.
Oh, sorry. I just think it kind of connected the prologue really well, and like the storylines and everything, and kind of gave us a satisfying conclusion to like Julie Mao's story as a whole, and kind of it was very like also really cool to see like the way the protomolecule like adapts to the human consciousness, and like how both like Julie and the protomolecule were kind of almost interweaved and interconnected in a way. It was very interesting, and like shows that the protomolecule again isn't like strictly evil as we once thought. It's more so trying to learn and adapt to its environment and setting. But also I think like especially given with Dresden and Protogen, I think it's like also speaking to a lot of hubris with them, because they think they can control this thing, adapt this thing, change it, and inevitably it's literally going to kill people because like they just don't understand it fully.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, ooh, let's just chuck some humans at it and see what happens.
Yeah, it's like
1.5 million humans.
Literally.
Yeah. Babe, that's genocide.
They're trying to control something they literally have no clue about. And it's obviously gonna cause chaos.
You know, you have a whole team of sociopathic scientists in charge of it. So yeah, the fact that they're just like data streaming all this, and like that's the creepiest part of the book to me, is like the live stream of Eros, where you can hear all like the dead people's voices.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
That was a lot.
So concerning. I'll admit, like when Miller's like, it's Julie, I forgot her name for a second. I was like, okay, for a split second, I was like, okay, you're taking this a little far, and then it was actually a lot more interesting.
They're like,
calm down. I know you want her alive, but
I want to ask her like a question posed for. Wait, really quickly. Am I the only one who has only read book one?
I've only read it.
No, I've only read
Okay, sorry. Then my question would be for all of you guys, like compared. Okay, let me phrase this correctly. After reading book 1, what do you think is like a theme you got out of it? And then for people who have read more than book 1, in comparison, what's an additional theme you would add to it? I'm just like really curious, and you don't have to get into spoilers, but like, if you could solidify a theme, what would you say?
I want to say like morality, in a sense, purely because everyone's so obsessed with whether they're doing like the good or bad thing that like it kind of has a lot of consequences for everyone because they think they're doing the right thing, and then it just gets worse for everyone else. And like it's like if you're really doing the right thing, should it really get worse for people? So I think definitely like morality and kind of like the justification of trying to do the right thing.
And for me, it kind of ties into that, but also power and like the consequences of your actions, especially when you do have a lot of power, and no matter if it's for the sake of curiosity or whatever. In Tristan's case, it's not like he has some ambitious goals, and he just doesn't care about how many people he kills along the way because he has the money. He can get away with it.
Yeah, I like that. I would say like. Additionally, the question would be posed like, what is morality and is it universal? And like, how do you measure it? And I got a little bit of like vigilante questions as well. Like, I mean, when it comes to, anyway, I like that. I'm interested in hearing from Blake and Hugo also.
Katie, do you want to go first?
I think those are like big running themes, what you kind of already mentioned, like the whole morality thing, and especially the like power. And like being almost thrust into positions of power and like what you do with that power. And also what you were saying, Catherine, as well about vigilante, that especially in one book down the line, I won't say which one, that is a huge theme. The whole like vigilante justice thing. And I think it's a big like running theme, I would say, is kind of how humanity reacts to like new situations. So introducing new elements into the like situation as it currently is, and how that then influences. I'm not sure I'm explaining this very well because like my brain cells have all gone.
No, you're great.
Late at night. So like you're adding other factors, and then how that sort of affects things, and like the conflicts. Because almost in this book, it's not like a stable conflict, but you have this kind of conflict between like Earth, Mars, and the Belt, and that's kind of almost like what's known. Whereas it's then becomes, you get all these other, like in this book we start seeing it with the kind of introduction of the proto-molecule, and then you get so many other kind of factors that start playing in, and it just kind of expands it as it expands.
And like introducing new things, because like everyone, especially like a government organization or a big company, they want to monopolize it and like be the one to own it, which causes people to dabble in things that should not be touched.
And I'm sure, I think there's a word for it, but it's escaping me, like the idea of I think I've lost my train of thought. I'll just think of it while Blake talks.
I think, the thing
is it like trying to play God or something?
I think it's ambition, you know, like I think a huge theme just like in this book and the entire series is just the ambition that certain people have and the way they're willing to overlook all the little people that they step on along the way. And then we just happen to follow the little people who are being stepped on. And like, that's the thing that keeps coming back. And also I think just the, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, the short-sightedness of humanity, I think, is something that reoccurs throughout the entire series. Especially in the series, you know, they're very short-sighted about like their wars and that kind of stuff, because like every time that they talk about the war, they're constantly worried about like losing Earth, like to like some people dropping rocks. They're worried about like the domes falling on Mars, because it's like, yes, that would be good in like the short term for the belt, but then like the belt would be cut off because they wouldn't have any of the supplies that they needed to. So it's just like, are we going to have to keep dealing with like ambition versus like their short-sightedness? And yeah, that definitely keeps coming up.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, what I was sort of trying to say before, like, it is the kind of doing what's best for like your faction. So because there's lots of different factions, and then the kind of characters we follow will always trying to be doing what's best for like them, and like, so the Earth people will be trying to do what's best for the Earth, and then like, and that kind of comes down the line, especially with the Belt. Like the Belt has different factions in it, and then they're trying to do different things, and I think like the kind of nationalism almost is very interesting.
I would say it's also like the extremism of group identity and what can happen when you become so split by tribes, and and how naturally self-interested we are, like 100%. I love that you brought that up, because I think that's a huge deal. When you feel so attached to a group identity that you can't look beyond yourself, you become dangerous sometimes.
And I think like said, that short-sightedness can come into that as well, because it's like they're just thinking about these immediate wars, but it could lead to the extinction of humanity.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it goes so wrong.
And so I think that leads us into the last couple of minutes before we end. Where do you guys, like, I mean, Katie knows, but for you guys who have not read the books or seen the show or know what's going to happen, where do you see this series going forward? What do you think is going to happen with the characters? And what do you think is next for the proto-molecule?
Everyone will die.
That's what I was trying to think about last night, because obviously it's still there and it's on Venus, and it's that storyline hasn't concluded, but I was like, I don't, like, obviously there's a lot more that's going to happen, and I'm assuming that it probably won't be present as we know it in that conflict for as long as I probably think it could, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm really bad with theorizing as well, so I'm like, I don't know, just take me where you will.
I think the proto-molecule is gonna like leave Venus somehow. It's just gonna like go boop and just flop off. Like boop. I don't know where it's gonna go. I don't know what it's gonna do. Maybe it'll just like be like, hey, I'm gonna be something else. I don't know. But I think it will play like a key role later on. But I think the second book is more so gonna focus on like the conflict between like Mars, the Belt, and Earth, and kind of like the aftermath of everything that happened in the first book. I think that's. But, I too am not that great at theorizing, so.
Yeah. I love to pretend like I know what's going on, but I don't. Like, I have to agree with that. I'm like, I do hope that the future, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I don't know how active I will be in reading the other books due to schedule things, but, like, I do hope that I like when fantasy and sci-fi books will dive into like the aftermath of war, because those have more consequences than sometimes the actual like present war. Like I love seeing, anyway, so I hope that we get to see that.
Well, I love everything y'all just said, and I know you're probably sing a lot of feels right now because you guys said some very interesting things. But yeah, I think the Expanse deals with themes of war and the aftermath of war specifically, and just and also different perspectives so well, because we do get different perspectives all the time. And let me tell you. Oh no, Katie.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I was just gonna say, like, you get the perspective of those who are like in like very high power, like rulers of Earth and stuff. But then you also get the like grunts, I guess, and you see people who are just like everyday people living their lives. And I think it's really interesting to see like both sides of the spectrum.
So the two new character perspectives we get in the next book, this is not a spoiler because it's in the first couple chapters. So we get Avasarala, who is she's a bigwig in the UN, so she's kind of our Earth perspective. And then you also get Bobby Draper, who is a Martian Marine, and the kind of stuff that she goes through. So we will have more of Earth and Mars in book 2, which is called Caliban's War. So
there's a war.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think the naming of these books as well, because like
that's
every
such
book,
names. I love the names.
they're so like tied, like you know, a lot of them are like named after like gods or like things from myth or legend that like have direct thematic ties to every book. So like it's not like, you know, this happens in this book. It's just kind of like a vague feeling. Like this book, you know, Leviathan Wakes, and the proto-molecule is the Leviathan, and it's waking up.
I love how the last book's going to be called Leviathan Falls. I feel like that's such a good, like, full circle.
I'm so excited for it, Katie.
Yeah,
I've only actually read up to book 5 so far, so I still have 6, 7, and 8 to read. Or 6 and 7.
Oh my god, these last couple are my favorite of the series. I'm so excited to read
I'm
this.
excited.
I was just going to say, some of these names are really cool. Like, it's tying in, like, Abaddon, Nemesis, Babylon, Persepolis. Those are the only ones I recognize. The other ones I don't.
Tiamat. Ooh, Tiamat.
Yeah. We'll talk about, like, the meaning of the names as we get into each book, because, like, to discuss them would be very spoilery.
Yeah, I feel like...
So don't look too into them before you read the books. And I think we'll end the live show there. So thank you, everybody who came. It was lovely chatting with y'all about this book, and I'm excited to continue.
Great time. Thanks
for having me. Thank you so much. This has been fun. I loved hearing you guys' thoughts.
Same.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
See you.